Hey everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to make this super cute and romantic dress for your stuffed animal that I think is perfect for Valentine's Day. I really wish I had a life-size version of this because I am in love with it. Now let's get started! Okay, first things first, I am obsessed with my nails for obvious reasons. They were actually pretty easy because someone you may know who's been on the channel did help me with these. Okay, but getting into the actual tutorial, first I need to cut out all my patterns. I'm using this beautiful pink gingham fabric with little red embroidered hearts on it. It's so cute and just screams Valentine's Day to me. The first pattern I need to cut out is the skirt, and since this is really long, I only cut out 1/4 of the pattern on paper and then folded over my fabric twice, so there's 4 layers total. And make sure to not cut the sides so they're all still connected, and in the end you'll have a very long rectangle. For the top, I'm going to need 2 of these pieces, so I just folded my fabric over once, pinned the pattern on, and cut it out. And then for the ginormous sleeve pieces, you'll need 2 of these as well. I wanted my sleeves super voluminous and puffy, so that's why this whole pattern is so big. After all the pieces are cut out, I'm going to start with the top piece, and we have 2 of these, and I'm going to flip them good side and pin them together. And I'm doing this instead of hemming around the top edge because that sweetheart neckline is going to be very hard to fold over and keep that shape. But by sewing around all the edges except this bottom one, we'll get that clean edge much easier. And I'll admit, even just sewing a straight stitch along those curves is a little bit tough. But if it comes out wonky the first time, you can always just undo that section and try again. Okay, so after turning that inside out and pressing out all those edges, the next step I'm going to do isn't completely necessary, but I made my piece a little bit too long because I want this to be like really short on the actual dress. So I decided to fold in those edges to just get rid of all those frayed edges. But if you want this piece to be pretty long, maybe your stuffed animal's torso is bigger, you don't have to do this step. It'll be hidden on the inside anyway, but I had a lot of extra fabric anyway and it'll make things super neat. Okay, after I've sewn that, I'm going to show you what I mean when I say it was too long for me. Like, I want this to end up about this short when it's connected to the skirt and stuff, so all this extra is eventually going to be sewed in the skirt. Now moving on to the skirt, the first thing I'm going to do is of course hem the bottom edge. To make it extra girly, I'm adding this lace to the bottom, so I'm first going to fold up that edge. This is with the good side facing down, of course, and then I'm laying the lace on top, trying to hide that frayed edge a little bit. And I'm making sure that the lace is high enough that from the front you won't see this top band. Now I can use a straight stitch to sew along where I've pinned. Once that's done, I'm going to hem the sides of the rectangle, and you could fold this down 1 or 2 times, it doesn't really matter. And just do that on both sides and sew straight down. Now the last part to sew on the skirt is the top edge, so I'm folding that over once and pinning it in place. And this is how we're also going to gather the skirt at the top. So the key here is when you sew straight across for this, do not lock the beginning and the end of your stitch like you usually would. And don't cut the threads really short once you're done. You don't have to lie to me. I know it wasn't red. Once that's done, I'm going to go to one of the ends and grab one of the threads and just start pulling on it lightly, and that'll start to gather the fabric around the thread. And I'm just continually pushing that gathered material towards the middle, and then once I've done it for a while, I'll switch to the other side and repeat the same thing. You're going to want to scrunch this up till the top of the skirt is the same length as the top we just made, or you could try this on your stuffed animal and just see how much you want it to overlap. I was initially planning to add Velcro to the skirt, but didn't end up doing it. Once it's the right length, you can take those 2 threads at each of the ends. One will be super long, one will be short, and just tie those together a few times to lock it in place. And now before we sew this onto the top, I'm just adjusting the ruffles so they're more even and spread out. You could even make it a little bit more ruffled towards the middle so it's fuller from the front. Now it's time to sew the top and the skirt together good side to good side. And since I want to get rid of some of that extra fabric, I'm laying the top piece upside down, good side facing up, and pinning the skirt on top of that, leaving about a 1/4 inch of the top still showing, and that way when I eventually turn this right side out, the top piece will be shorter. But if you are trying to keep most of that length, just match them up exactly. Now I can sew along here to join them. Okay, now this is looking like an actual dress, and before I add the Velcro, I'm going to move on to the sleeves. The first thing I'm going to do, like any other sleeve, is hem the bottom edge, but this time I'm going to make sure to make that fold big enough to eventually fit my elastic. My elastic is luckily really skinny, so this kind of just looks like a normal fold, but if yours is thicker, just make sure you'll be able to feed it through and have a safety pin that size also. And I'm folding it twice to make this edge cleaner. Before I sew this, I figured I'd just jump to the next step because I can sew them at the same time, and that's hemming the top edge, which is a curve like this. And I'm only folding it down once because it's already pretty difficult to fold around curves, so I'm just doing it once, making sure to leave enough room for my elastic. And now I can use a straight stitch to sew around these edges. Next, it's time to add the elastic to give this sleeve its puff. So I already pinned a tiny safety pin to my really thin elastic. I think it's like 1/8 of an inch thick. And really quick, I'm going to measure how long I need this to be, so I'm wrapping it around my stuffed animal's shoulder since I'm going to be doing the top one first. And don't be afraid to leave a lot of extra because you can always tighten it later. Okay, so now I'm going to feed my safety pin through that top fold, and I'm just scrunching the fabric around the safety pin, then pulling it down around the elastic. And I just have to repeat that until my safety pin's made it all the way to the other side. And since the elastic is going to be way shorter than the fabric, you want to make sure the end doesn't get sucked in. So I like to make sure it's pinned to the fabric in 2 places, with the pointy side obviously facing away from you. Once I've gotten to the other side, I can pull both sides of the elastic out a little bit, and then you can use a safety pin or just another pin to pin those together. Now I can repeat the exact same process for the bottom edge, and I'm just measuring around my stuffed animal's lower arm, which is basically the same. But once the elastic's fed all the way through, I'm going to join the ends with the bad side facing out actually, because the next thing to do is sew this closed. Before I do all my final pinning, I'm just going to pull the elastic extra tight and just see if it's the right size or if I should pull it more. And this is where the elastic slipped out of my fingers and got fully sucked in, which is annoying. Since it's not even close to the ends, I had to kind of just cut out a part of the middle to fish it out. But once I sewed that closed, I just have to repeat the same steps and be more careful. I'm pretty sure this time I didn't even bother trying it on my stuffed animal. I was just like, it'll probably be fine. And it was, so I guess I just did a good job measuring in the first place. Okay, once I've matched up the edges with the bad side facing out, I can sew straight down here. This is another point your elastic might get lost, so make sure to really hold on to those. But once it's all sewn, it is good to go, so I'm going to just try this on really quick. And if it's a little too loose, you can always sew just kind of further away from that edge. But mine fit pretty well, so I'm just cleaning up that edge a little bit. And I decided to do a tiny zigzag stitch over that edge to help it not fray as much. Here is what my tiny zigzag stitch looked like. It's not necessary, but I don't know, mentally for me it makes it feel neater, so I did it. And now we have our adorable little puffy sleeve. It honestly looks like one of those like ice packs you'd put on someone's head in a cartoon, and I love that. Obviously we still need a second one, so I went and made that off camera. And now the dress is almost done, but I still haven't added the Velcro, so I'm going to do that next. I have a lot of extra fabric right in the middle here, so I'm just going to keep that folded up and sew the Velcro on top of that. I'm overlapping in the back just to see how thick I can make my Velcro, and this standard 1/2 inch one was good for me, so I didn't trim it or anything. And I initially was going to do Velcro on the top and the skirt, but my skirt was a tiny bit longer than the top, so I figured it could just overlap in the back, and it really only needed Velcro on the top. Make sure when you do this, one of the Velcro is on the good side of the dress and the other's on the bad side. I know it seems obvious, but I definitely messed that up as a kid. Okay, now I'm going to sew a straight stitch just around the border of the rectangle and be right back. Here it is sewn on, and we are finally ready to try on the dress. I'll admit I did add something after this, so this isn't the final try on, but I just couldn't wait to see it all put together. Make sure for the sleeves, the seam is pointed down under their arm, and the top of the sleeve was that curved edge, And for me, it's easy to tell because on the inside, the edge is really frayed. I'm not sure the orientation really makes a difference though. I just purposely made it curved to give it that extra length to go over the shoulder, but I'm not sure if it was worth it. At this point, you can sew the sleeves onto the dress with like a needle and thread, but I decided to leave it separate because different stuffed animals have, their arms in different places. So this way, more types of stuffed animals could wear this. There is one more thing I'm going to add to pull this all together. It is optional, but my original idea for this involved bows. So I bought this light pink ribbon. I got a really tiny one. It's 1/8 of an inch wide. I looked up specific instructions on how to make a nice one, so that's what I'm going to show you now for my second attempt. So first make a loop like this with the free end on top, and then take the rest of the ribbon and wrap that over the middle. And don't make that tight or anything because next we're going to make another loop and put that through the middle loop. Then you can pull it and it should form a bow. It's hard to explain, but hopefully by watching it, it's self-explanatory. Now you can trim the ends at an angle and that'll give you the cutest little bow. I made 2 of these because I wasn't exactly sure what look I was going for. My first idea was 2 bows right at the top of the neckline right here. Or I could do one on the waistline right in the middle. Or I could do one right in the middle of the neckline at that lowest point. This one for me just felt the most classic for some reason, and a part of me really wanted to go all out and do a million bows just all over the dress, but I knew in my heart simple would be best. And at this point I was just creating the kind of dress I would want to wear. So that's where I decided to put it, but there are so many options, so it's up to your personal style. I'm sewing this on with a needle and thread, and I'm making sure to go through the center of the bow so it doesn't, accidentally untie. And I didn't want the white thread showing in the front too much, so I only went through the whole thing once, and then kind of in the back, I went through a few times to lock it in place. And then I can lock my stitch in the back, and it is done. Now here's the whole thing tried on, and like I said, I love this dress. This is probably my favorite dress I've ever made. It's just so pink and girly and puffy and everything I love. This is definitely inspired by one of those Selkie dresses, and someone did request for me to make that, so I probably will get to doing that eventually. But that is it for this video. Happy late Valentine's Day. I know I didn't get to post it exactly the day of. This would be the perfect dress for a cute little Valentine's Day picnic date, so check out my video from last year for ideas for that. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!
I didn't see that we were living worlds apart. I should have known from the start that getting love from you, it should.
At this point, you can sew on the sleeves with just like a needle and thread. So I bought this light pink 1/8 width. So I bought this light pink 1/8 width ribbon. Oh my gosh.